Hey everybody, Gary here with POW Music, and I want to welcome you to this conversation, guitar lesson, and concert with guitarist Carter Arrington. My goal here with these interview lessons is to introduce you to the people and ideas that will help you to develop your craft, stay inspired, and design a life where your creativity can thrive. Carter Arrington is one of my favorite guitarists on the planet and a great teacher. He discovered guitar at 12 and soon after began attending the Berklee Summer Guitar Sessions and the Atlanta Institute of Music, all before graduating high school. In 2003, he moved to Austin to get his degree in jazz performance at the University of Texas and quickly became one of the city's most in-demand and popular guitarists. He earned 3 Downbeat Student Music Awards and performed at the Montreux and North Sea Jazz Festivals as a student. Recently, Carter moved to London, England, but returns to Austin frequently. In addition to leading his own bands, Carter has worked with artists and musical groups such as The Crazy World of Arthur Brown, Prager, Peter Rowan, Alejandro Escovedo, Bernard Purdy, Fred Wesley, David Grissom, Kirk Covington, and many more. Carter has created courses for TrueFire and also offers one-on-one lessons. I've taken 5 or 6 of those myself and have learned so much. In this conversation and guitar lesson, we discuss topics such as combining influences and styles, finding your people and being part of a musical community, practicing creatively, jamming on one chord for extended periods of time, using band-in-a-box, backing tracks and loops, fun metronome drills for developing great time and dynamics, using different triads and arpeggios over one chord, single string playing over a drone, ear training and listening, using constraints to inspire creativity, fretboard visualization, and staying inspired. Added to the video will be footage of a live performance that Carter did just hours after the interview with his trio, featuring Adam Jackson on drums and Ryan Hagler on bass at the Hi-Hat Public House in Austin, Texas. If you're watching on YouTube, check the video description for video chapters so you can replay your favorite parts or skip ahead. Also, in this video, Carter and I are both using handmade Forshagi guitars. Chris Forshagi is a luthier here in Austin, Texas, and makes wonderful instruments, so I'll also link his website in the description. All right, let's get into it. You ready, man?
All right, man.
All right, let's do it.
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Actually, one sip of coffee.
I guess I'll talk into that camera. Hey, everybody. I'm sitting here with Carter Arrington, one of my favorite guitar players. I discovered Carter, I guess, 2019. I went to a photo function and saw you play Actual Proof and was like, wow, what is going on here? It was incredible. So to me, what's amazing about Carter is the way that he mixes together amazing rhythm. So he's super funky. Lots of like little rhythmic subtleties going on, his time feel, but then he could also shred. So amazing with your all aspects of your technique. Funky, soulful, jazz, straight ahead jazz, fusion, funk, gospel. I feel like you could do pretty much everything.
I think that was part of being in Austin. It was like, you know, you would there'd be so many different pockets of musicians in town, and just before you knew it, you'd be kind of thrown into 1 or 2 styles that you weren't familiar with, but your name would get around to people, and you'd be like, okay, maybe I can figure that out. Yeah. And sometimes they were good fits, and that's kind of what I've managed to, you know, take a hold and kind of take with me as my playing developed. But I was never much of a country player. I tried a couple of those, and I was like, okay, this isn't my bag.
Wow,
so
that's a missed opportunity in Austin.
It's man, it's you know, and I actually, even as I get a little older, I'm like, you know, okay, I should have dived in a little more, because there's some beautiful approaches in that music and some wicked players. So still a lot I could learn there. But that was part of how the wide scope of things developed. It was just being thrown into professional situations to where it's like, okay, can I figure out how to do no harm in this situation and respect the vocabulary of what's going on, and just you know, some of those things which we can get into more depth in if we want to.
Is that something that happened organically? It all just kind of came together? Like when you first moved to Austin, was it like, my sound is just this one thing and it just started to expand, or like did you have to actively be like, I'm on a jazz gig, but I'm going to play that little gospel thing that I've been doing in church, or like?
Man, it's okay. Yeah, it's a good question. I guess what I had when I got here, because I didn't have much experience at all. So like I was a pretty studious player for a long time. I always took lessons, and I had been to a music school when I was still in high school. I'd go to high school during the day, and I'd go to this school at night when I moved to Atlanta. And I was looking for a good university, and that took a little while. And eventually I was just like, okay, they're just trying to get me to play jazz. So I'm just going to go get a jazz degree, because that's my way to play electric guitar in college. And that's
right.
and that was kind of it. But man, when I moved here, I had like zero experience playing in bands or any of that stuff. So I was good. I was shedding in my bedroom and like, you know, trying to further my sound and transcribe and stuff and doing all the good guitar things that we're all supposed to do. But yeah, I had zero experience. So I started playing with...
How old were you at that time?
I think I was 20 when I moved here.
Okay, wow.
So yeah.
That's so mind-boggling to me that you had no band experience at 20, but...
yeah, it was like, it was minimal. It was highly minimal. And yeah, I got more playing experience here in the first 6 months than I had in my entire life previous. So, and I think that's really what I was after. That's one of the reasons I moved to town, because I was like, okay, like I got to figure out how to play live. I got to figure out how to play in bands if this is something I'm going to do. So, but yeah, I was in a jam band. That was my first gig, and it was like, yeah, with Chris actually, with with Chris Versaghi, and that's how I met him. And
nice.
Yeah, so it was that and cover gigs and other things like that, and then. Yeah, I'd be thrown into jazz gigs and, you know, things that would develop my ears a lot more, and, you know, they were all challenging in different ways, and they were all fun in different ways. But as far as my own sound was concerned, that's kind of the only way I felt like I was able to approach it. It was like, okay, well, here's me doing this, because I do think whatever our sound is and however we sound, it's like especially if you appreciate how you sound a little bit. Like a lot of guitarists are self-loathing, but I do think like, you know, the other side of that is important too. You've got to celebrate things that you're like, man, this is cool. I think this sounds good. And so yeah, all these styles, I just tried to play them as authentically as I could in my own vocabulary, you know, and because that seemed to be the best result. Right. That was the thing I could do the best, was to play like me. Yeah. So that's kind of what I tried to do, whether it was playing a jazz gig on a Strat or, you know, just not obsessively being like, oh, I have to sound like Charlie Parker or Brent Mason or somebody like that, and going down that hole, but just just trying to be me in all those styles, and yeah, part of that's just laziness also. It's like, it's just like, well, this is the easiest way to get from A to B, so I'll do that.
So before you went to UT for jazz, you weren't studying jazz?
No.
Wow.
I knew maybe 2 standards. And somehow, at every audition I was ever on, they would call those 2 standards. So I would wind up looking great.
What were the 2 standards?
I was looking great. It was always All the Things You Are and How Insensitive, and they were the only 2 tunes I knew. And so every audition it'd just be like 7s, okay, like great. Right. And they'd put me in the best bands, and I would barely know how to read. I, you know, didn't know much of anything. I was terribly unequipped, but you know, you kind of jump up, you know, sink or swim, and it's, you know, each of them taught me a lot. But yeah, I was totally a phonetic jazz player. Okay. Like I understood how some of the theory worked, and you know, kind of how to navigate it. But yeah, I wasn't listening to bebop records all the time or doing that. I had like a couple of guitarists I was really into, like Birelli, Lagrene, and George Benson. And so those were kind of the 2 guys.
I saw your post on Facebook recently about George, and someone commented, and you said, yeah, something about George Benson and Birelli Lagrene, I can't put my finger on it.
Those were the 2 guys. Those were the 2 guys, and they would do this. They would kind of play jazz like rock players, because that's kind of how I got into guitar. It was like heavy metal. And,
there's that energy, like, and I'm not that familiar with Birelli and Lagrene, but like George Benson's playing has this energy and playfulness and kind of like rock star kind of thing going on. Yeah. It's not just like technical prowess. It's like anyone can relate to that energy. You don't have to be a jazz fan or anything.
He's kind of infectious, and I really like that he would have these Quincy Jones, Rod Temperton, like, you know, which is like the Michael Jackson dream team. Like he would have these pop hits produced by these guys. Right. And then like wedged in the middle of the tune, there would be this insane guitar solo. And you're just like, this is on a platinum record, and this is bonkers. It's absolutely nuts. And he's just always killing it.
Right.
And I loved that. Because he had the groove, but he also just had this crazy stuff on top of it.
Right.
And then Birelli, some of his layout stuff, like Birelli was the first guy I got this lick from, like on a Hendrix chord. It's so which is you hear a lot of people play that lick, and it's just licked down the melodic minor scale. And it's just that's it, right? And he would just burn down that thing, and I'd just be like, awesome. And I was just like, oh man, that's how a rock player would do it. Right. That makes total sense. Yeah. And like the swing thing didn't make any sense to me for the longest time.
Wow.
And it was a funny thing too, because like as an improviser, or trying to get my improv together, one of the things that was really frustrating about jazz initially was I had no connection to it rhythmically. And as I was trying to play over tunes or, work out my fretboard or do some of those things, I was like basically trying to do two things at the same time. I was trying to like melodically improvise, which is hard enough in its own right. But then I was trying to rhythmically improvise as well in a style that was totally foreign to me. And I didn't have much skin in that game. So I would sometimes take standards. I used to use what was that program? Band in a Box?
Yeah.
You ever used Band in a Box?
So, once or twice.
Band in a Box and I were like this. Right?
Nice.
That worked
and they just all day long.
Yeah, and so like I didn't put a set of changes, or like a tune, like All the Things You Are, or blues, or whatever chords I have, but I would change the styles all the time. So I'd be like, let me do this over like a Weather Report hip hop thing.
Whoa, so same progression, same structure, and suddenly a total new feel.
And and it was really easy. You just go through the menu and just kind of cruise down, and they had like 2,000-3,000 different styles. So once I found feels of stuff that I was like, I can kind of get into this groove, or I can kind of do this, it made way more sense, and it helped me kind of work some things out. And as I got more comfortable with swing or certain tempos or any of that kind of stuff, then it was like, I kind of know what's happening here. I just have to do it in this feel now, instead of trying to do both things at the same time.
So what was your feel before going to school for jazz? Was it a rock background? What was your initial interest with guitar?
With guitar, it was all heavy metal. Like at first,
heavy metal.
So it was like it was Metallica and Slayer and Pantera and Megadeth and all that stuff. And then I kind of went from that into I got really into Sabbath and like started to get into like some more 60s and 70s stuff. So it was like it was like the Doors or like get a little hippie and get into that stuff. And then it kind of went like a little Guitar Hero-esque. So it was like Joe Satriani and Steve Vai, and then I got way into the Shrapnel record stuff. So it was like Yngwie wasn't on Shrapnel, but like once I heard Yngwie or Tony McAlpine and guys like that, it was just like, whoa, okay, ferocious technical guitar playing, which like Dimebag Darrell or somebody like that, they're already pretty much, he's right up there, just where you'd hear these solos and they would just be insane. But, then I heard Greg Howe one day, and I was at a music store in Atlanta and hanging out with a guy there, and he was like, "Oh man, you gotta hear this guy, and like here's the record." And I was like, "Okay, I'll check it out." I'm like 15, and like I remember going into it was a Blockbuster Music, right? And Blockbuster Music, for those of you that don't know,
I think we're the same age. I'm 40. How old are you?
40.
I don't remember Blockbuster Music.
It was like, so we had them in Virginia. Okay. I'm not sure where you grew up.
I was in New York.
Okay, but it was essentially a CD store. And I feel sorry for everybody that worked there, because like they had this thing to where you could grab any CD and you'd take it to a listening station, and they'd get a little knife out, and they'd unwrap the CD, and you could listen to the CD.
Try before you buy.
Essentially. So I sat there and I was like, okay, Greg Howe introspection. Let me check this out. And literally I remember sitting down and just hearing it, and the opening lick on that record was just like, it just blew the back of my head off.
Yeah.
I was just like, oh my God, this is insane.
Wow.
And he was like a really technical guitar player that was, it was sassy, man. He had so much rhythm behind what he was doing. And he kind of swung everything, even though he was a shredder. And so he just had this feel that was like incredible. It was absolutely insane. So he kind of changed me a few clicks to the left or right at that point.
Right.
And then I got into like George Benson. I was listening to Parliament.
Okay.
I started getting into like, like funk is cool.
Right.
Like,
There was this groove thing going on.
Absolutely.
From there.
Yeah. And yeah, man.
So Benson kind of was then a bridge, because then you went to school, but you had been checking out Benson before you got into jazz
Benson
school.
was totally the bridge guy.
Right.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, because like he was just as technical as the rock guys, and it had this like, this presence to it. Yeah. And so it was a natural kind of bridging
and clean
thing.
too.
And clean, man. So you'd sit there, you've been like hearing like all this stuff, and then you're like, nah, that sounds pretty awesome actually. This other thing. And so man, then it went from like, it was like Wayne Krantz and Scott Henderson. I think when I was in the music school thing, that was
awesome.
Yeah, there was a guy that was like, he was really, really good. And he was like, I was like, oh man, okay, I gotta, hope one day I can play like this guy Derek McCoy. And those were two records he was listening to. It was Wayne Krantz's 2 Drink Minimum and Birelli Lagrene Standards. And so he burned me 2 copies of those. And I had a little transcriber box that I would sit down and feed a CD player into it and sample stuff down. And man, I just sat there. I was grinding out as much as I could.
You were transcribing note for note solos and things.
And man, I was terrible at it at first. It was just literally like, it was like, it's like dink, okay. Like 10 on string 2, just tabbing it out, doing whatever I could. And it was really slow at first, but I got way into that music, big time.
Awesome.
And
is transcribing something that you've been doing all along your journey? Is that something you do a lot of? Man,
not initially. I think how I was initially learning was stuff in guitar lessons, but the main thing I really did, the stuff I was listening to a lot. So 2 things would kind of happen. One would be, I would like be in school, like in junior high or high school, and just kind of like spacing out during class, and I would like...
You're like singing a solo in your head.
Yeah, pretty much. like I would just kind of be like playing back, Metallica's Sanitarium or Master Puppets or something, and just in my head I was just like, I was just listening to it even though I didn't have anything to listen to.
Yeah, you were acquiring that vocabulary through osmosis.
Essentially,
of some sort.
Or it's just you get to a point to where you memorize the music and you know how it goes. This was before I even played an instrument. But, but that stuff was kind of there, so I think that process of internalizing things was big. But but I had tab books. So I'd buy those Cherry Lane tab books, and anytime I went and bought a record, I would try and get the book to go with it. And I would just kind of be flipping through and mining stuff out. I didn't even really know how to read, but I could find little spots in the book to where I'm like, okay, like that chunk, I think I know what that sounds like, and being able to match up what rhythms were in my head to kind of how they were at least written on a page. Like I could just kind of at least see the shape of things, and I would look at it and be like, okay, I think that's that lick, and I'd sit down and try and play it. And be like, so it was putting stuff together that way. But my ear didn't get really involved too much until I was messing with improvisation, or when I started to transcribe. That was the big thing. It was like, oh wow, like I'm really bad at this. Like there's not much connection to my ear and what's happening on the fretboard, in an organized way. And so that that really started to strengthen those muscles a little bit. Ear training in school and stuff like that too.
Do you feel like, I feel like ear training is kind of the elephant in the room a lot of times with students that I am working with. I mean, even for myself too, like to get to the next level of harmony, I need to do more ear training. Do you feel like ear training it's just something you can't bypass? You have to acquire, you have to build that connection, and if you don't, you're not necessarily going to be able to play from a place that it's coming through you? Like what is your view on the importance of ear training to your development and to your students' development as a teacher?
Well, I guess it can, ear training, like that term, it can have a lot of different forms. Right. It doesn't have to be like collegiately organized, like,
Right.
you must know your intervals
Right,
and be able
right,
to identify this,
Yeah.
or, spit out this phrase the way
Yeah,
that they do
I guess
it in a
I mean
class.
like learning by ear.
Learning by ear, I
Yeah.
think, if I would rather have a great ear than all the knowledge in the world. I think like
Right.
that like a great ear is still like a thing that's gonna be your quickest connection to playing something that really is coming from you, and it's your fastest way to relate to other musicians.
Yeah.
I know a lot of people that have a lot of knowledge and they don't listen, and that doesn't mean they're bad musicians, but it means they're hard to play with. And I'd take somebody that has no knowledge and is listening over that like any day of the week. But yeah, it's a funny thing also, because if it's a discipline that we're taking seriously and we want to, like, a lot of people that care about music, they're just like, oh man, I want to get better. Like, I want to get better and better and better at it. And we tend to start doing research, and we're like, oh, okay, well, like, here's all the scales and all this theory and all this stuff, which is super important. That's not to say that stuff isn't, but like, just things that are as simple as just like, oh, okay, like, I know a melody in my head. Can I just pick a note and play that melody anywhere on the guitar?
Right.
And it's
Right.
And it's funny. I've had students that are, and myself too. I'll pick a weird melody, and I'm just like, wow, man, I can't do this. Like, I'm really bad at it. But I'll sit there, and they've been playing 20 years, and I'll be like, cool, like, play me a note on the guitar, and then play me Happy Birthday. That's the first note of Happy Birthday.
Right.
And then they're just like, it's like you're watching the plane smash into the mountain.
Right,
They're just
right.
like, whoa, okay, I know all this stuff, but that side of it, and it's a really simple thing, and I think it's how music was. I mean, it's how music has been handed down for generations. It's just like people would sing songs that they heard, and things are passed down orally, and so I mean, I think it's super important in any capacity. And in some ways too, it can be just like getting used to how something sounds. It's just, and listening to yourself as you're playing, or giving yourself time to figure out what something sounds like.
Right.
Like, even one thing I'll do sometimes is I'll drone a string, and I'll just I'll take a mode or something, like, so you could take the major scale.
Here's a drone.
Yeah, so we got this E drone going on, and I'll take a major scale, which is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 1, like that, and I might just kind of sit around and improvise with that. And then I might take another mode. What's another mode, Gary?
Dorian mode.
Dorian. Okay, so Dorian's built 1, 2, flat 3, 4, 5, 6, flat 7, 1. And I might just like say, okay, well, let me check out Dorian. And then I might just say, okay, let me play around an Ionian for a minute, and then let me switch to Dorian.
Very nice.
And just by doing it on one string, it's like I'm actually listening to how it sounds.
Yeah.
And most people, when you talk about modes, all they're thinking about is patterns.
Right.
You aren't thinking about...
or relative modes, which isn't going to necessarily elucidate the intervals of the actual mode.
Yeah. And like when I learned modes, like nobody was like, hey, this goes over this chord. Or like, hey, check out what it sounds like against the chord, which is the whole point. It's like without a bass note or without a chord, we don't even hear how that sounds. It's just like, oh, okay, it could sound like the major scale, or here's another pattern. So I think a lot of, and I guess when I say like I learn things phonetically, it's kind of like that. It's like I would just kind of be assimilating information, like learning a bunch of scale patterns and stuff like that. But I didn't find out a lot of useful approaches for a long time. to really check out how this stuff actually sounded.
Yeah.
And once I was able to kind of do that in a friendly way, like that was pretty friendly. You're just, okay, well, I've got this sound, I've got this sound.
No chord changes, just
just a drone, nothing's moving around,
yeah.
no stress, one string, you know? And I could be like, oh, okay, well, like Dorian kind of sounds like this, and Ionian kind of sounds like this, or whatever scale you wanted to do that with. So I think of that as ear training too.
Right.
Like just putting yourself in a place to where you can listen to what things are actually sound like, and that sounds obvious, but it's it can be kind of confusing because I think there's also a lot of information these days about. It's got to be pretty overwhelming in some ways to try and learn the instrument now, just because it's like it feels like you're walking into a Walmart and you're just like, wow, okay, like I have like man, I just want to buy one tube of toothpaste, and there's just like here's 9,000 different brands of toothpaste. You're like, I just want to learn this one thing. How do I? How do we like turn the choices down a little bit and get to something like that?
And that shiny new thing syndrome, like, no, not this video, next lesson, next this, next that.
Well, that's useful, but it's got to be. There's got to be more. There's got to be more stuff. The listening thing, I think, like it makes it really personal. There's something unique about being like, oh, okay, like can I hear that and can I connect my hands to my brain or my heart, depending on where you're listening from. And yeah, man, that was a really powerful thing. Yeah. And it just, the more I kind of strengthened that muscle, I think the more a lot of other things started to make sense. It made them simpler. I also realized in some cases of frustration, I was trying to play stuff that I couldn't hear. Right. You know? And I think we all kind of fall into that too, is we're trying to like, oh, okay, I want to get better, I want to get better. Yeah. And you're messing with stuff and I'm just like, man, I really don't even know what this sounds like. Right. And it never really feels like it connects. Right. You know? And so if you can slow it down enough to be like, oh yeah, okay, here's kind of how this sounds, or I like this note going to this note, then it's like you're able to have a little bit more skill. Yeah, or could I sing that note that I think I'm trying to target, right? That's like, a big one. Yeah.
Let's take a short break from the conversation to hear Carter and his trio play the Herbie Hancock tune, Butterfly. Then you went to jazz school. So I love jazz. What has always just been the problem for me with jazz is that my sense of spontaneity and freedom and creativity is constrained by the fast chord changes.
Sure.
That just keep coming.
Yeah,
and
man.
it's like,
Yeah.
arpeggio lick, this scale. Like, so can you describe the process for you of going from, okay, I play more simple harmonic music to now I'm studying jazz and all the things you are and these fast chord changes and shifting key centers, but you still play with that sense of creative freedom, and like you might be playing over a lot of chord changes, but what I hear in your playing is still something very primal, like a primal creativity and a primal feeling, and the emotion and the passion and the fiery kind of vibe that you could bring to that. So like how did that come about? Did you go through a purgatory where it wasn't quite there and then it got there?
Did I, man?
Tell me about this trip through Dante's Inferno.
I had some patient teachers, I'll tell you that much.
Right.
Man, so where I started in my my band in a box journey, I guess.
Yeah.
Well, because I was trying to learn other people's solos for a long time, and I was just realized one day I was just like, man, I don't really have my own sound. I was starting to notice that, like, okay, like I'm good, and I'm trying to like kind of punch above my weight listening to some of these players, and I'm just like, I want to kind of start thinking about my own sound. And so I had my little band in a box program, and basically the only sound I heard, speaking of ear training or kind of being connected to those things, like, okay, well, what do you hear and what makes sense to you?
Yeah.
All I really ever wanted to play over was a minor 7 chord. Mm-hmm. So I was just like, okay. So I'd put D minor 7 in into a little program, and it'd be going for like 78 bars and for 40 choruses. So I'd just sit there all day, on this groove, and it'd just be going, just something like that. And man, all I really heard was the Dorian scale, or the minor pentatonic. So I would just sit there for hours upon hours playing over this one chord. And what I guess a couple of things started to happen. And I started in a position that felt right, and like a single scale pattern kind of up here, and then I'd kind of get brave, and I'd be like, okay, I think I hear this note. And I'd be like, all right, like cool, or I'd be on this string, and I'd start to kind of, like send scouts to other parts of the neck, and just, started to sew in a little bit more. And eventually I got to the point to where I was like, oh, okay, well, these cage patterns that I've learned, they all kind of, and then I'd have kind of 2 bits of real estate, and I was just kind of connecting this thing. I suppose I eventually got to a point where my whole scale, or my whole neck with the major scale patterns felt good.
Right.
And I could kind of cruise up and down, and I could do all this stuff.
Modally, basically. Just
essentially, yeah. Just so I was playing over this chord, but I could be... And I would just always sit down, and still this was the only sound I really heard. It's just all I wanted to listen to, and it was the only scale that made sense.
Right.
And so every time I would sit down, I would try and kind of unearth different ways to just like, okay, well, how to make this sound different, or how do I make this sound interesting? And little did I know what I was really working out for all those years was a lot of rhythmic ideas and a lot of phrasing. And so that was kind of what was happening behind the scenes.
Okay,
and, which was a really powerful thing.
Right.
But I did get into finding a concept to where when I started to work with arpeggios, like so, I'd be playing over this chord, and I'd say, okay, well, here's a D minor 7 arpeggio. And the notes in D minor 7 were D, F, A, and C. And eventually I had the idea, and I was like, well, okay, this is in the key of C. I'm like, okay. And instead of just looking at the notes, I was like, okay, well, what if I'm still in the key of C, what are these chords? And so I kind of got that. This was a George Benson thing. I would hear him play off the chord a minor third up, like kind of the relative major version of that. You know, so he'd be playing over a D minor chord, but he'd be playing, he'd do stuff like that, you know, to where he was, kind of that thing. And so then I kind of discovered, I was like, oh man, well, like F major 7 sounds awesome over this. Yeah. You know, so I'd be playing over D. And I'd start kind of, and then I'd kind of cruise up here. I was like, okay, like that sounds like that's cool. That sounds a little jazzy, and that's the thing. Yeah. And I was like, well, okay, that's a note that's in the scale or that's in the chord. Right. And I just kind of looked at the relative chord of the key. Right. So then I did it on the next one, which was A minor.
On the D.
On the D, yeah. And then so like even with those three, I'd kind of like, instead of feeling stuck in a pattern, I'd be like, oh, okay, well I've got this sound. So they were kind of three different shapes that I could use. Yeah. And so then, which essentially I think of as like, okay, I just kind of like started exploding the major scale. Right. I was like, wow, there's a lot of stuff in here.
So basically off each note of that initial triad, you got the D minor, you got the F major, and then the A minor.
And then the A minor. And you could do the
extensions of the...
Yeah, same. So like here, if we play the D minor 7, we get 4 chord tones. Right. You know, 1, flat 3, 5, and 7. Yeah. And with this chord, we're still thinking of D as the center of the universe. Right. So this gives me flat 3, 5, flat 7, 9. So we went from 4 chord tones to 3 chord tones and an extension. Right. Then if you go to A minor, you get 2 chord tones and 2 extensions. Right. If you go to C, you get 1 chord tone, the flat 7, and 3 extensions. Yeah. So all of a sudden you just have this, it's just highlighting notes that are in the Dorian scale. Yeah. But it's framing them in a way that makes them sound different.
Awesome. And now this as an approach is something you heard in your ear in George Benson's playing?
Yeah, I would hear him do the stuff off the third, like quite a bit. So like that little lick, which is straight up. That's an F major 7 arpeggio. Yeah, and he would just kind of. Greg Howe did it too. I would hear him play it a lot, but. And I was like, man, what does that sound? Like, that's cool. Yeah, once I just kind of found that, I was like, let's see what else is hiding. Let's see what else is hiding. So just over one chord. I started basically superimposing. Yeah.
So I'm sitting there playing over D minor 7,
thinking about it. Not just like, oh, okay, everything's in D Dorian. Okay, everything's in D Dorian.
So off the bat, you have this freedom to kind of just shift the shape and shift the...
Exactly. Yeah. And playing changes. And once it came to playing chord changes, the process was really similar. Except now the harmony was changing. Right. So it's like I was at least used to shifting things that were related to each other. Yeah. But now it's like when you're playing over this chord and then this chord. Right. You know, and I mean this is a chord change you can kind of float around with a little bit. You know, you can kind of play the same scale over both and it sounds pretty good. But if it's a chord change like this, something like that, like you're not going to be able to get away with blanketing things. So I did like a F minor 7 to E major 7. Right. Okay. So I can't kind of be like I can sit here and play like F minor pentatonic, which is what most of us would do, and just check out how it sounds when the chord changes. Right. So and just play some kind of groove. That note's not bad. Like it's not. This isn't working out too well for us. Yeah. It's like that sound on an E isn't. So like basically I had to start saying like, oh, okay, I'm moving into this sound. The same structure doesn't work. That I was playing before. So I'd have to kind of be. Like now I'm kind of saying, hey, okay, I think the chord change is in this key, or it's in this, or it's in that. Right. But basically, I had to start shifting.
Yeah.
And it took me a long time to figure this out, but in jazz, the chords are moving by so fast, and even if they're related, you know, like in All the Things You Are, all these chords, we've got the 6 and the 2 and then the 5 and then the 1, so all of that's working together in the key of A flat. Mm-hmm. There's the 4 chord, but then we change to the key of C.
Right.
And like I could kind of sit here and noodle in a scale and it would sound pretty good.
Right.
But it didn't necessarily feel like I was kind of like acknowledging the chords,
right.
or my lines didn't sound like they were fitting
right.
too well. And I actually found that the best process for me to do was to take 2 totally unrelated chords and start getting used to the point where you have to change. And the simplest way I think to do this is to take one chord shape, and it could be any kind of sound that you want, and just move it up a fret or down a fret. So let's say we're sitting here in a bar and we go, okay. Exactly.
Nice.
Right. So, and what I would do, I would take rhythm completely out of the equation. And I would say, okay, let's say I'm playing 8th notes. So it'd be 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3. And so, and I would just say, okay, let me play 8 notes. Yeah. And get used to the point that changes. So the first thing I would do, I would say, okay, let me play 8 notes in F. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and on the 9th note, I would have to be in that chord.
Right. Yeah.
But I had to get used to where that place was, and I was like, 2, 3, 4.
Oh, and then stop on that chord on that out note. Okay.
And for extra credit, you could sit there and be like, okay, and when I do that, I want to figure out what it's doing over the chord.
Yeah.
Like, so I'd be like, okay, that's the flat third of E.
Right.
So I'd sit there for a while and do that, and I go, flat 7, you know. 5,
right.
3, 4, root 2, 3, and I would also do it in time.
Yeah.
Because that's the other thing. It's really tempting to kind of start and stop and start and stop.
Right.
But if you sit there and you're like, no, just keep this moving.
Yeah.
Keep it going, even if it's a simple exercise. It just kind of eventually you just settle into it. But yeah, so then I would do that. Then I'd go the other way. I'd say, okay, well, let me take the lower chord into the higher chord. And I'd say, okay, so now I'm doing 8 notes in E minor and landing in F.
Right.
So 3, 4. Flat 7, 3, 4, 4, 3, 4, flat 7, root. Okay, and then I would try and move. I said, okay, well that feels tight on both sides, and then you just kind of be. You know, but it's essentially that same exercise. It's like, okay, can I just shift these 2 shapes around?
What did you do there? It was a little more creative with your note choices.
Yeah, I
kept going through both chords.
I basically did Dorian instead of the arpeggio.
Oh, okay.
So
Right. Right. You gave yourself more note choices. Yeah.
Yeah, but when I know where the shift point is, then you're like, oh wow, like that sounds cool. He's adding other colors.
Yeah.
But that can work for any 2 chords.
Yeah.
But what was killing me for so long was just I didn't understand where I needed to shift. I thought I had more time than I did.
Right.
And that's
right, because all the things, if it's da 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 da, right, there's 2 beat changes, some of them.
Yeah,
right?
They're all like a bar each for the most part. So it's so really in a tune like that, I could do the same kind of thing. So on and so forth, but I'm doing kind of this 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. That's 8 notes in this sound, and then this chord. Well, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And so I would just try and take eighth notes through everything.
Right.
And as that got comfortable to when I could just kind of work that a little bit, then I was like, okay, well, now that I know about this grid, maybe I can start leaving some space.
Right.
And so
Quick question before that. So what you just did there, were you doing seventh chord arpeggios through each one on all the things?
For the most, well, and if I was to stick to just that, I would be. So that would be straight seventh arpeggios. There's a something kind of like that. And actually, that shape kind of works out. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. That kind of naturally takes you into the next part of the thing. In the case of the E, said like little licks like that. Little chromatic lines and enclosures and stuff. Really, all I'm doing, I'm just buying time. That's it. I'm just trying to get to 8 notes before I fill the thing. So I'm going 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8.
So you're just connecting things with chromaticism or whatever.
And then I'm trying to land here. I'm just looking at, okay, where's that ninth note going to hit? Where do I want it to hit? So once you do that, then you can kind of be. So I'm still thinking of zaga da 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 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 1, 2. That's it. That little grid is going in my head. Whether I'm playing everything or not. That's but having to fill.
Now you're playing that silence because you're playing, but then that silence is played as well for you.
So I could just 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 2, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 5, 6, 7, 8. 5, 6, 7, 8. It's like I'm still kind of, that bouncing ball is kind of moving around. But until I was able to separate that and just be like, oh, can I get used to where I get in and where I get out. Everything felt a little disconnected, honestly. And that helped me tremendously to do that. And then once that happened, I felt a little rhythmically freer to, kind of. Because I knew where stuff was, I was like, oh, okay, I've got to get in, I've got to get out.
What I loved about what you just did, so up until that moment, you were moving the voicings to other parts of the guitar, but there you kept them all in one position.
And you can definitely do that.
So these are the two approaches, right? Move a position around or move a pattern around or stay in one position.
Yeah. And staying in one position, I think, was that was kind of the more challenging thing for a while. Because it was like, oh, okay.
For all of us.
Just because it, not only was it like, okay, how well do you see your fretboard? Or, it's like, can you see all the possibilities on your fretboard, but in one spot as the keys are changing? And it was hard.
You got that whole chromatic scale right there.
It's all right there.
2 octaves or whatever.
It's all right there, man. And, and like another thing with the playing changes deal is like, just to take something really simple, and it doesn't have to be jazz and it can be any style of music, but if you had like a really simple little groove that's just kind of hokey, but let's say you're on these 3 strings and you do a G chord to a D chord. And let's say that's our jam essentially. Great. So you aren't thinking about scales.
No, I was just looking at those 3 notes you gave me, and I was like, oh, okay, 3 notes, cool. I could focus on the rhythm then.
And if I was just looking at if I was just trying to connect each of those for 1 bar each, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. You know, like that's. I'm still kind of thinking about that 8-note thing when I'm looking at, you know, one chord, the moment to where the chords are going to change. But yeah, and also if you can just phrase out of that.
Yeah.
And then if we start breaking out of that area a little bit, yeah, like once we add a string, right? And
it's like, whoa!
Yeah, you're just like, man, that feels like something. And that's kind of a phrasing thing right there too. It's like, okay, well, can I sit and grind with one thing for a while, or like in one area, and then can I slowly start opening things up? You know, even like a pentatonic scale or something. If you were, you know, if you just stuck to these two strings, you know, for a while, it would like, and just built as many ideas as you could. By the time you added the B string, it would just be like, wow, man, that really feels like something. Yeah. When we're immediately looking at this area and we're like, ah,
right. So
here's all this.
Constraints are good in that way.
Constraints are really good.
Yeah.
So like, you know, by the time I hit something higher, you're just like, oh, cool, okay, that feels like it's going somewhere.
Yeah.
But the fact that I waited until, you know, oops, sorry about that. Oh, Gary's popular.
Spam.
Oh, there we go. Yeah.
For the wrong reasons.
But like, yeah, the fact that I was sitting there as we were grooving, it was like, okay, 1, 2, 3. 4, here's my new thing. You know, like, so I'm kind of waiting till that fourth bar to kind of say, okay, let me spread into a new part of the neck. Right. Or let me introduce something, and let me wrap the phrase up. Right. You know.
And this is almost like you're giving yourself a plot to tell a story.
Yeah. Totally.
You're saying like, tell a story, I could say anything. Let me just tell you everything. But no, okay. Here's my plot. I'm going to start here. Yeah. And then I'm going to go there.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So
and it's intention.
And it's a really simple plot. You're just like, oh, okay, like stay here for 3 bars, and then you can start stretching out for the 4th one. But it really helps with the blank canvas thing. You just sit there and, you know, because I have days like anybody where you just like, you're like, okay, I got to play something that's terrifying, and you're looking at the blank canvas, or the tune is hard, or the tempo is difficult, and just little things like this, just me saying, okay, so you don't get overwhelmed with the whole neck at once, you know. Right. Can you just stick with this small thing for a while?
Do you ever do that on the bandstand? Are you ever like, all right, I'm just gonna start right in this little like
all the time.
Okay,
big
cool.
time. Yeah. So like if you know, and sometimes I'll just do like a 2-note thing. Right. And this can be a fun rhythmic approach. But like I'll do a 2-note thing just to see if I can connect with the drummer. As I said, so if you're, you know, so if it's kind of like that tempo, so you're, if you're kind of sitting there, I might. I might start stretching out from there, but it's like if I'm just, so you know, I'm kind of chilling in this box. Add a little more. Another string. Arpeggio off the 5.
Awesome, man.
So yeah, just kind of building things from just that little like, okay, can I make, I use the Rumpelstiltskin analogy. It's just like, okay, can I spin straw into gold? Can I take like a tiny little area and make music out of it? Just like you were doing with the two triad shapes. It's just like, oh man, okay, can I stick to this and make an idea?
Right. How much could I squeeze out of this?
Yeah.
You know, this moist sponge.
That's a good way to put it, man. It's a good way to put it. And with the and even with those two triads, there's a whole lot of bits of area you could do that with.
Speaking of triads, so I know you're big on triads because I've taken some lessons with you on Zoom, and you gave me ideas of just taking a couple of triads and moving them around like over a chord progression. What would you say is like the most like nuts and bolts way for any guitar player that wants to expand their fretboard fluency and their ability to play all over the neck, whether they're in rock or country or jazz or just anything? Like, what are some things they can do to start using triads, which all of us guitar players, we hear triads, you got to know all your triads, you got to use your triads, but it's like, how can I start doing that?
Yeah, that's a great question, because it is kind of, I mean, it's intimidating in some ways, and it's kind of like, and you feel like it's silly in other ways. We're like, well, of course I know my triad. Like, come on, man, that's a triad. That's a triad. Right. I know my open chords.
Yeah, you got this one here, right? Yeah.
But like, if you're somebody that's coming from the place of like, okay, you can play bar chords. Right. I think that, knowing your major and minor bar chords on your sixth string, like, so you got your major here and your minor, and on the fifth string, you got your major here and you got your minor there.
Right.
If you've got a sense for those major and minor bar chord shapes, essentially, and you can kind of fluently use those. If you can kind of get around on those a little bit, and they feel good, which, because like in most kind of playing situations, that's some of what the guitar is going to be doing,
right?
Kind of hammering it out. But when I started to play with like more acoustic players, the singer-songwriters, or bands where there was more than one guitar.
Yeah.
And I was the new guy, so when you're the new guy, you just have to fit into the old guy's stuff. It's like, okay, that's the parts he's been playing for 3 years. Like, he's not going to change that.
Right.
So I started noticing that I was like, oh, okay, well, I have to figure out kind of how to do this in a different range. And if I'm doing these big old bulky shapes, like, it's just too much weight most of the time. So what started to help me big time was I took the top 4 strings of the guitar, and I was like, okay, how do I let me just do a triad on, well, let me see if I can do a triad on the top 4 strings. So if we took an E, for example, I'm going 2, 1, 0, 0. Right. And the other thing I started to think about too, I was like, okay, well, like, what are these notes doing? So like, this is the root, that's the third, that's the fifth, and that's the root. Right. So I started looking at the function of things a little bit more. And then essentially I took each one of these notes and I said, okay, I'm gonna bring it to its next door neighbor that's still in the chord. So the root would go to the third. There we go. And the third would go to the fifth. And the fifth would go to the, which is the open string, that'd go to the root. And then the root here would go to the third. And then I would get this shape.
So I like how you think about it as on each single string, where's the movement happening? Yeah,
like each voice is kind of, there we go. And then if you bar, you can catch the third up top. Right. So this voicing's going 3, 5, 1, 3. Still an E chord,
right?
But it's a different thing. And then I do that again. The third would go to the fifth. The fifth would go to the root. There we go. And then the root would go to the third. And this right now, this is kind of us doing the long division, right? It's like, some people could just see it as shapes, but it's cool to know kind of like, here's why these shapes are the way that they are. Right. So yeah, that goes to the root, and then the third will go to the fifth.
Third goes to the fifth.
Yep. And then tip. And we get this shape.
Oh, this shape, right.
Yeah, right. And then if we do this process again, we get basically an octave higher from where we started. We're back to the root, third, fifth root.
Right.
So I started to have these three voicings, and I was like, okay, like. It sounds like the end of the classical piece or something.
Yeah.
But yeah, and so I was like, oh man, this is kind of cool. So I got these different inversions that I wasn't playing before. And then I kind of started looking at like, okay, well, how does this relate to my lower strings? Because that's kind of, I don't know about you, but that's pretty much still how I visualize almost everything on the guitar. I'm like,
from your low roots,
E's and the A's. Yeah, the E's and the A's, it's totally it. So this, I would see this as like, okay, well, that's part of that bar chord. Or part of the, or I'm sorry, part of this open chord in this key, or a bar chord if we're moving it around, right? So that one I'm seeing the relationship off the E string.
Yeah.
You could also look at like what either the top note or the bottom note is doing. Like sometimes that helps too. Looking at the next shape, I was like, okay, well I'm looking at that note right there.
Right.
You know, so this is essentially like it looks like a C chord.
Yep.
You know, but I'm looking at that note on the A string.
Right.
And I'm also looking at this note for this chord because that's basically our chunky bar chord shape.
Yeah.
So I just kind of found my ways to relate to those a little bit.
That's how you started.
That's how I started with. So I was like, until I saw the context of what the shapes were, I noticed I would miss them a lot. I would try and go for it, and I'd be a fret off, or 2 frets off, or I'd pick the wrong shape or something like that.
That's somewhere where I'm struggling, like to think, okay, this is a G, here's my triad, because I'm still kind of like.
Yeah, sure.
There's still a little of that sometimes.
Well, and if you see that, does it help to see it from there?
From the C, that or that.
And so that's kind of what I have to do.
Right.
But what's cool is when you see it from those bigger chunks, you can also break them into smaller sets.
That's
and
true.
Be like, just because I'm seeing kind of the bigger context of the shape.
Yeah.
But yeah, so first, basically, I took those shapes and I was like, okay, I would just kind of try and move back and forth, something in time, and then I might say, okay, well, since if I know how these are functioning, 1, 3, 5, and 1, how do I make it minor? I lower the third. Say, okay, can I do the same thing for E minor? So if we're looking at, so there's your major, right? So, yeah, exactly. And then the next one, we'd be up here. Yep, and find the third. Yep, there we go. And then back to, exactly.
Cool.
So I started to have major and minor shapes, and I was like, okay, like this is cool. And, but I noticed I was still a little slow at it. So then I tried to take that through a few different keys. I would just run the major stuff through a few different keys. So let's say I maybe did F. So I'd go, okay, we'll do E since we're on E. So you go, okay, here's all my E voicings. Just up and down. And I might say, okay, well, can I do it in the key of A? So these are all the same shapes, but now we're kind of starting in different spots, right?
Yeah.
So we've got.
Are you purposefully going a fourth? Do you like to practice in fourths and fifths?
Practicing in fourths and fifths, I've found is really helpful for me.
Okay.
For a couple different reasons, like a lot of progressions work that way.
Right.
Number one, so like I think it's a common.
You're
change.
often going to the 4 chord or the 5 chord or something.
Yeah, and that's a common movement to kind of have to navigate anyways.
Right.
But it's far enough away from where you're at to where it kind of
rearrange everything completely.
It kind of shocks your vision of the fretboard a little bit.
Right.
If we were just doing this in half steps, it'd be like, oh, okay, here's my E.
Right, exactly.
F.
Right.
And not that there's anything wrong with that. That's totally useful also.
Yeah,
but I like the distance that it would kind of create.
Yep.
So yeah, I'd do that in the key of A. So there, if we're down here at the bottom part of the neck, I'm still looking at this low A note, And then the next shape is going to go, which is coming off the 6th string, so I'm visualizing that note. And then we'll have the one with the 3rd.
Do you bypass this, like as far as just thinking about it, or?
And that's not to say that like that shape isn't fair game.
Yeah.
I think I just I use these just because it was like, okay, like these are the inversions that I'm seeing.
Right.
And shapes like this, I kind of see it's like, okay, well that could be part of this, or this could be part of this.
Right.
You know. And yeah, as you get these three shapes down to where you're like, okay, I can connect these three voicings if this is the chord symbol.
Right.
Then yeah, you do start to discover, you're like, well, I could also, you start to see little moves to connect them, or you realize, hey, well, that's a triad shape too.
Right.
Or like, you find things in between that you could also utilize.
Sure.
But these were just kind of the three pillars that made me go like, okay, I think I can hold on to that, and that's useful.
Yeah, gotcha.
But yeah, so I would do it in A, or then maybe D. But I just got to where I could move them around a little bit. And then what started to be kind of fun later on was I was like, ooh, okay, and this is kind of slowly getting back to where we started, which is like, okay, you're playing in a band with an acoustic guitar player who's playing all open voicings, and you can't just like, you don't want to be doing the same thing that they are. So if we had a progression, give me a progression, Gary. Let's take a progression.
Let's go 6-4-1-5.
6-4-1-5. Okay.
You pick the key.
Let's do it in C. That's fine. Okay. So we're going to start with so that's 6-4-1-5, right?
Yep.
Yeah. So we got. Great. Okay. So what's kind of neat about these voicings as you get them down, you can basically play chord changes in the same spot, and you can slowly kind of move up and down the neck. And what happens is you start to see these progressions in a different range. Right. You start to just realize, oh, well, any chord shape I need is really close by. Right. So I might kind of sit there and do, so that's an A minor shape that we had. There's the F. There's the C. When I do the G, I start moving up the neck. Okay? Then the next A minor after this one is this guy. F, C, G. And so on and so forth. So yeah, let's play that groove again.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
So, I can kind of just sit up here and be in a different range than the other people are. So.
And you just keep moving your way up, and just keep playing it 4 times.
Keep playing it 4 times, and I'm just and you can connect them any way you want. This is just how I'm connecting them now, and I'm trying to just consistently keep it the same way. Right. So I've got the A minor. I change one note to catch the F,
right,
and then I can either stay where I'm at and catch the C, and then move up on the G, or I can move up on the C. That sounds a little more triumphant, so let's say I do that. So I'm like, okay.
I like how you made an aesthetic decision there.
Yeah.
It's not just random.
Yeah, so you got the A minor, the F, the C, then the G, then the next one, A minor. And now I'm going to move up on the C because it's triumphant.
Ooh, I like that voice leading.
Yeah, and so and the C is always going to kind of move down to the G, right? So we get this. So on and so forth, and and this could be funky, this could be a finger picking thing. Right. It's just triad. They're this is just an exercise. Yeah. But it can be musical, and we're trying to apply it in a musical way. Yeah. You could do it with a part like that. Let's say.
Right, you gave it a rhythm. Boo-ba-da, da-ga-doo-ga-da, da-ga-doo-ga-da, da-da.
Yeah. And I mean, that's something too, like whether you're working on scales, whether
Right.
you're improvising, whether you're working on voicings.
Yeah.
Just like one of the best things that I eventually realized, and it took years, it was just make every exercise musical.
Make it
Does
musical.
It doesn't
Yeah.
matter if you're playing a scale
Right.
and you're going, oh, you know, it's just like, okay, this is horrible. It's just kind of like, just make it musical. It doesn't have to be anything crazy, but it will kind of just help, or put it in time, or do something. It'll just kind of help keep you engaged.
Yeah.
And it'll feel like, I also think that's one thing that'll help you use this stuff.
Right.
Really, it's like if you're used to kind of making
Yeah.
music out of it or putting it in time, when you go to play it with people, it's not going to feel like, oh,
Right,
here's this
yeah.
thing I kind of know,
Yeah,
but I haven't
yeah.
really like put like some
Yeah.
traction into. But back to the triad thing, you know, and that was us kind of like making everything move up, right?
Right.
We could make everything move down. Or maybe make this, actually what might be smoother is to make the first one move up and then shift down. You know, so I'm
Yeah.
up here at the A minor,
So you
F. Yeah, we'll move up.
You're
for
doing top 3 strings or middle?
I'm doing top 4.
Okay, so
Top 4. So we've got
there's
that
our
there.
A minor, then we want our F. So
F. Yeah, and let's say we move down. Yeah, and then the G.
and then from the C, then we're gonna go to
we'll move back. Yeah.
the right. So
Yep. And then we can move down to the next A minor.
so that would be,
Yeah.
and then
Up to the F. Yeah.
So, or yeah. Oh, but
Yeah,
we're
there
gonna
we
do
go.
these two.
Mhm.
I
Yep,
like
yep.
how you go like that. I've never done that.
That took a
I
while.
thought it was impossible, but I
don't know.
I can do it.
I don't
but
always
it's-
get it, but I still go for it sometimes.
So
Yeah.
we've got a,
Yeah, there we go.
and then we're gonna go to
let's
the
go to the
to
C,
the
which is
C,
still right under us.
right there.
And then we'll move back.
Oh,
Let's
then,
say we're moving down. Yeah, yeah.
right.
there
So,
we go. Yeah.
and then what's cool is like, I guess then you make the connection. Like, okay, so from a 1 to a 5, just looks like that.
Yeah.
Okay, so 1 5, right? It's
Yeah.
just slide that down.
Yeah, and you can see you got one note in common with those chords.
Right.
And, you know, it's kind of cool to see those little things popping out at you. But yeah, man. So you can voice that up. You can voice it down.
Right.
You could sit there and do a.
Yeah. Now I'm hearing like Coldplay and stuff.
Yeah, yeah. And that's without adding anything else. So you get, and you could add fills and stuff, and you can just. But it was a way to where once I started doing this with triads, and then I started doing it with other chords, and
Right.
realized I'm like, hey man, this is pretty cool.
Yeah.
I started just comping in or thinking about accompaniment in. Like, I guess before it was kind of two-dimensional. I was like, oh, okay, here's the chord. How many voicings of this chord do I know? And it's like, okay, and like that's what I would choose to play.
Right.
Which isn't bad.
Right.
it's
Like
sort
you
of-
just, I see that symbol. I know this chord shape.
Yeah.
Boom.
Here's what I'm
That's
gonna
it.
use.
Yeah,
This
yeah,
is
yeah.
my tool, hammer. Like, damn.
Right.
And but then it was just like, oh, well, like the question became, well, what part of the neck do I want to be in? And that was a completely different thing. I was
Right.
like, well, okay, like I can play it anywhere now. So do I want to be up high? Do I want to be in the middle? Do I want to do this or do that? And yeah, and then there were plenty of approaches soloing too. Like you can use all this melodically as well as harmonically. So,
Melodically.
yeah, melodically. So for let's say we were in E. Say you were playing on an E minor, and you know a pair of triads that sounds pretty cool on that is D to E minor. Okay, so because if we look at kind of how that stuff works together, so like E minor is the 1, 3, and the 5 of the chord, right? So we've got that. Or actually, I like the ones you did better. So that's the 1, 3, and 5 of the chord. And if I'm still thinking about an E bass note, it already sounds like an 80s like ballad. But this gives me flat
Tom
7,
Cruise visions
9,
in my
and,
head.
yeah, this gives me flat 7, 9, and 11, which is kind of cool. So
sick.
like,
Yeah.
so
Hell yeah.
yeah, right. That kind of sound, and yeah, we've.
What song is this?
I don't know.
It's something. Oh, yeah. So you're recontextualizing those two triads based on your root motion.
Whatever your bass note is.
Yeah.
But just on the E minor, that's a cool sound.
Right.
Like we'll hear the dubia.
And this kind of goes back to the Benson concept.
It's absolutely.
But you're using something as simple as just major and minor triads.
Major and minor triads, and they're right next door to each other.
Right.
Which is kind of friendly.
Yeah.
So, with that concept that we just went through, I could say like, okay, well, here's a D, and here's an E minor. Here's a D, here's an E minor. Here's a D, and here's an E minor. So we could kind of.
Can I stay on this E minor while you do that? Or maybe.
Yeah, something a little lower. 2, 3, 4. So like as a rhythm thing, you could kind of. You can just find little lines and stuff.
Because you're getting half notes and half steps and whole steps because of the triads.
Half steps and whole steps, and man, and what's crazy? Like how many notes are these total? It's 6 notes, right? So that's the scale is 7 notes. So you have 85% of the scale just between those two sounds.
Yeah, it's a concept and a sound, but it's so inclusive of way more than just what you're thinking of it as.
Yeah, big time. But then as like a soloist, you could kind of.
Yeah.
Like so yeah, you got E minor, D, E minor, D, E minor, D. So those are all triads.
Damn,
or
that was cool.
And that's in one position. So yeah, I stole this lick from a dude in a music store in Atlanta, and it's it's been great. Yeah, E minor and then D. Yep. Yeah, and you can go all the way to the bottom of the guitar, all the way up.
Just connecting two triads.
Disconnecting two triads. So that's kind of in position. Okay, so that's that there. You could all. You could also just kind of use it. You could kind of use it on a 3 or 2 string highway.
Right. 3 or 2 string highway like that. Yeah.
So however you want to arrange these notes, it's okay, and every fingering will be useful. Right. In some way, shape, or form. But yeah, like those, there's so much you can do with them. But yeah, just kind of voicing things this way started to just really open up a lot of stuff.
Awesome.
Essentially,
Very cool.
But yeah, if you ever take 2 triads in a scale, if you pick them next to each other, you're getting 6 out of the 7 notes of the scale.
Ah, good rule of thumb.
Like so, like another popular one too is if you're like. If you're playing on a major chord, you want to get that triumphant kind of Lydian thing. So like if we were in C, you could do C to D, and then C to. It sounds like Timmy's on his bike.
Yeah.
Oh, you can do it, kid.
So that was just C, D, C, D, C, D, just going straight up.
C, D, C, yeah. So
love it.
Oh, sorry, whoops. C, D, C, D, C, D, like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, is this something that you do like all the time as part of your approach to soloing? Is this kind of like a part of your sound?
It definitely can be, yeah.
Uh-huh.
And like, I think as I got into trying to build ideas out of little things, little sets, I guess, sets of notes. Yeah, it became natural to be like, oh yeah, like, well, okay, these are like good small sets of notes to see.
Yeah.
And I use triads quite a bit. It's not the whole thing, but it's a lot of it sometimes.
Awesome.
Yeah, and I don't know, I'm still learning about it. Just I keep finding stuff. I'm like, man, okay, like, there's new ways for me to bridge this and to use this.
Awesome.
And so that and just doing stuff from inside the key, that's a huge part of what my approach is, you know. So like, you know, and an example of that could maybe be like if you were playing over A minor 7, which is kind of something we were doing earlier. I think of that as the 2 chord of G major. So if I took all the triads in the key of G major.
Now you mentioned Dorian a lot. Do you just by default think Dorian on all minor chords?
That's a good question. I think Dorian was the first scale I became really like obsessed with. And so it's really easy for me to see on the guitar. So that's kind of, I'm just like, I tend to relate a lot of things to it.
Yeah.
And when I do that doesn't, you know, just because I'm thinking of Dorian doesn't mean that I'm saying, hey, here's where the strong notes are every time. So I'm doing it as like, hey, here's the pattern of notes that are going to work. You know, that doesn't necessarily mean the strong notes of Dorian or the strong notes that I'm going to play. But it shows me where my playground is on the guitar.
Sure.
It's a sound that I'm extremely comfortable with and just, you know, able to kind of feel like I can run around in it.
Yeah. When I chatted with Peter, I took Peter Maz's a couple of his workout arpeggio classes, and he talked about just Dorian being the default on any minor, even if it's 6 chord. Like default being that major 6 being the part of that sound. Yeah.
Well, and actually, like as I've played longer and longer, what I tend to do now, I just take the 6 out quite often. So instead of whether it's a 2 chord or a 6 chord, I notice a lot of the lines I'll play was.
Sounds awesome.
So that has no 6 in it.
Right.
And then ironically, you know, what are those notes? We have a minor triad, so it's that.
It's that triad thing, right.
It's that. So if you put that together in a scale, because that's the only note that's missing.
Right.
That's the 7th note.
So
that's not there.
that is a
So this would be an A minor and a G.
And a G, A minor and a G, right? Because the G is the whole step down.
So whatever your minor chord is, whatever minor chord you are. So like a second ago we did our
the
jam
1 and the 2.
You're basically doing it's like, okay, I have the root of the whatever the chord is.
Right.
So I'm playing at E minor 7, it's E minor, and then the major triad a whole step down.
Whole step down. Gotcha.
So this is E minor and D. This one's D minor and C.
Right.
And this one's A minor and G.
Got it.
You know, which sounds like a Steely Dan blues.
Yeah.
You know, just has that kind of sound.
So many players I love are into Steely Dan. I've never gotten into like Isaiah Sharkey's obsessed with Steely Dan.
Is it? Okay,
He talks about them all the time.
I can see that. Yeah. But yeah, man, one concept around the same time I was finding the arpeggio thing that would link all that stuff together. I was jamming on A Dorian one day, and I just had my little A bass note, and I was like, okay, cool. And then I started thinking about all the chords in the key, and I was like, oh, okay, like you know, so all the triads in G, like how they would work, you know, we'd have G major's the 1 chord, A minor's the 2 chord, B minor's the 3, C's the 4, D's the 5, E minor's the 6, F sharp diminished is the 7, and G minor or G's the 1 again, right? I would put them over an A bass note just to see what it sounded like, because I was kind of jamming, you know. And I was just like, whoa, okay, like all these work pretty well.
Yeah.
And so I started to kind of know, so I'd be like in a jam band or something and just like, you're like, okay, it's like this chord for like, you know, 10 minutes.
Right.
And you're like, how do I keep this interesting? And so I started to draw on these other shapes to kind of, so I'd be like, you know, and it just gave me other stuff to work with. As a soloist, all the triads in the key of G.
That was all of them in the key.
So I've got the 1 chord, 2 chord, 3 chord, 4 chord, 5, 6, 7, 1. And over this bass note, they're all highlighting different parts of Dorian, right? So here we've got the 1, 3, 5. Here we've got the you know, the flat 7, the 9, and the 11.
So in a sense, you can basically play off any triad in the key just to highlight different notes, you know? Which gives a lot of freedom. Which means just work on your triads in the key and just feel free to play any of them over any of the chords as long as it's in the key.
If the chord is just sitting there.
If it's sitting there,
if it's sitting there, it's great.
If you're going through the changes, you might create a crunchy sound that for some applications might not be the right sound.
I mean,
but for others it will
technically it works. And I'm sure like, you know, you'll find stuff that you wouldn't normally have found. But you're like, oh, actually, this is kind of cool. There's some different ways to do that. And so just kind of realizing how much is there from the key is pretty amazing. And then I also had the thought to be like, oh, well, okay, well, your open G string is in there, right? So like that's in the key of G. So then I was like, oh, well, maybe I can take all these voicings and just do an open G string instead. So like all the middle note of all the chords.
Sick. Right.
Or the open B string. That chord, I wouldn't have found that chord, you know.
I feel like as guitar players, we neglect the open strings when we could so often use them to do shit like that. That's so awesome.
So yeah, man. That's it. So, and all of that stuff, I feel like I cracked open by playing over 1 chord.
Right.
Like that's still me sitting with
band time. Like really, in a way, prepped you for playing off the changes because you got all these ideas. By just really zoning in on 1 chord.
Big time. And like, so all the stuff from the Band of the Box years where I was just like, I'm just playing over D minor 7. And I changed the keys and stuff. But I was just playing over minor 7 chords all the time. It helped me work a lot of this stuff out. And just go like, oh, yeah, I can use this a lot of places. You know, which is, it's fun.
So I guess for all of us listening, we should just don't be afraid to put 1 chord on that looper and just see how much we can extract.
Because there's a lot, you know, and I still find stuff. I can just, you know. You know, I'm still finding stuff. 2, 4. And when you feel like you're getting settled, just see if you could move on to eighths, which are going to be 2 notes in the space of this. So I'm going 1, 2, 3, 4, 1. So this is me essentially jumping up to the next grid. And if you hate counting, like 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and you can use words if that helps you. So Carter, 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 whatever, you know, Carter, Gary, Carter. And maybe like you could start just trying to switch every 2 bars, right? So 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. And then if this guy, and then you shift back, then just go back and forth. And if you can't do that, just take the time to get that to where it feels tight.
Yeah.
From here, then you could go to triplets, which are 3 notes in the space. Arrington, 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 Arrington,
Lucky
Arrington,
you.
Arrington,
Heimdauer, Heimdauer.
Yeah, Heimdauer, 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 Heimdauer. Okay, then back to quarters. 8th notes. 16ths are 4. Okay, so let's hit stop on that for a second. So then from here, you can kind of start doing a couple different things. If you want to start developing your articulation a little bit more, you know, let's say we have something in a, we could say where we're in 8th notes or 16th notes, and it doesn't matter what the tempo is. But let's say you have 4 pitches. Yeah, and I'm just taking a piece of it, just that A minor pentatonic scale. In whatever pace you're comfortable with, it could be, you know, doom, 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 doom. And we could just, and these could be about, these are pretty much 8th notes where we were a second ago. And then if you want more control over some of your dynamics, we have this 4-note sequence. See if you can accent each note. You know, as a standalone thing. So if I just was trying to accent the first note, by accent I mean play it harder.
Right.
Got that, got, and this kind of creates that little rhythmic mountain you're talking about. And I think of this as topography. I think of it kind of like, okay, what's the shape of your line, or kind of how's this attacking? So if I was to do that so that's the first note, right?
Want this back on?
Nah, that's all right. We'll do it in a second. Then if I did the second note, third note now.
Like already, just that has a feel.
Just like
to
that.
it.
That's got a feel. Fourth note.
You gave it like a, yeah.
Oops, I missed it. Second one. Down, up, down, down. Third one. Fourth one. Good. Yeah, man. Yeah, so just creating that topography, and then when you speed it up, it's kind of like
yeah.
So, and just being in control of that.
Yeah.
Basically, that's part of what does it. And you know, even my old teacher Dave, you know, when he was showing me scales and stuff like that, we'd be running sequences and stuff like that. We'd be doing something in 4s, like, and he would always have me accent the downbeat. So, one.
Right. I think that's something often neglected, because we're usually like,
yeah. And when everything sounds
even,
the same,
and as if that's a virtue, everything very even. It is sometimes, but
Yeah. If you want more of that, like, oh, okay, where's more rhythm? It's like, yeah, okay, you can, and I mean, you can, and the harder thing to do is to make other things quieter too. I mean, that's like,
I just experienced that. I was like, why doesn't my accent stand out like Carter's accent? Yeah, I noticed palm muting is a huge part of what you do, but I noticed that your palm isn't necessarily stuck. It's as if you can still move your hand a little. Yeah, so your hand's still moving.
Yeah, in some ways it's kind of good just going like this. I feel like I'm turning it on and off as the lines kind of happen. You're the first guy to ever ask about that, actually. But yeah, there's times where I'll kind of like, I feel like my hand opens up a little bit to where I'm not, I'm not kind of doing that. But yeah, when things are getting funky, or when I'm trying to make them funky, I'm definitely
You're
trying
lightly touching, but you still have movement there.
Yeah. So it'll definitely float a little bit. But yeah, so with accents, that's a great place to start if you don't normally do that. Now if you were kind of thinking about this stuff to work on your time, so we've got this click at 90, and let's say I'm doing something like I could be accessing those 3 grids or playing a groove or whatever. I'll do it with the grid stuff first. So we had quarters, eighths, triplets, 16ths. So on tempo, this program that we've got going, it has a luxurious feature to where you're able to remove beats.
Right.
Okay. So on the tempo thing, this clicks at 90 right now.
Right.
So if let's go ahead and take out the 2nd and 4th beat. So this is essentially going to be like us having, and actually go ahead and take them out completely.
There we go.
Okay, so essentially we just cut this tempo in half.
Right.
So we're really playing this at 45 right now.
Right.
So let's say I'm going to do the same thing though. So I'm going to 1, 2, 3, 4, quarter, 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 8th note, triplet, 16th. I'm doing exactly what I just did a second ago. Sorry. I'm just getting half of the information from the metronome.
Right. Yeah.
Okay. So then go ahead and take out the 3rd beat now. Okay. 35 divided by, or no, what was it? 45 divided by 2. That'd give us, 22 and a half. So now I'm only getting the downbeat.
Right.
1, 2, 3, 4, quarters, 2, 3, 4, 8th notes, triplets. Okay, or you can do this. That was impressive.
You can do this. That you were right on that.
It's tough, man.
Yeah.
You can do it with a groove also. So here, turn all 4 of them back on again. Okay. So let's say I had a little groove like. That's easy enough. Okay, so let's say I'm playing that. That's my groove. So here at 91, 2, 3, 4. That's what the click gives me every beat, right? Go ahead and take out 2 and 4. Or really, you can take out any 2 beats of your choice. It doesn't matter. 1, 2, ready, go. Okay, now just take out a, 1, 2, 3. And so what I'm doing right now, I'm trying to keep it in my head. I'm subdividing, just like, okay, where's the river? Still playing the same tempo, really. I just have less information.
I'm going to try not to bop, because my bop might throw you off.
2, 1, 3, 4. So right now, since it's at 90 and we're getting 1 beat, it's kind of like, and also on these deeper tempos like this, or these less information, I'm paying attention to like, okay, where are my landmarks?
Right.
So like, I get a little cue on that.
Right.
And actually, is that even on the down? Yeah. No. So I get it on the power chord, and right there. So it's just that. It's trying to say, okay, those are my 2 points to kind of check myself.
You
and
are
see if I can
like, you're being
up.
forced to develop that grid.
Absolutely.
This is just like, it's forcing the issue.
Because before it's going,
right.
and you just get fed every bit of it. So last thing, so now I've got 1 beat. I've just had the downbeat at 90 beats a minute. I want you to put it at 45. Okay. So now it's gonna.
Whoa.
So this is just gonna give me. Oh, other way, yeah. This is just gonna give me. Basically, I'll have the first hit. yeah, right. So, but it's still the same tempo. Okay.
Hell yeah, man.
That's just a little bit.
That was awesome.
Thank you, man. Yeah, but it's just a little shit like that to just try and like get your inner clock tougher.
Yeah.
And I used to do all sorts of goofy stuff. Man.
Right.
I'd sit there, I'd have a metronome in the car. I would like, when I was putting gas in my car, I'd sit there and like I would just try and like use the same amount of pressure on the pump to where I could get a tempo on the gas thing. So it's going up. So I'm like, all right, I think it's here. And I would shut my eyes and try and stop on an even dollar. Dorky stuff, man.
Wow.
Super geeky things. But you can always work on your time. You do not need your instrument at all. Like most of that stuff is up here. So that's where a lot of it was kind of coming from.
Choosing to have the life of an artist, can mean a lot of things. It can mean a daily habit. You don't necessarily have to be a professional. It's just that you choose to create on a daily basis, or you choose to make your life one dedicated to the arts, in your case, music and guitar. I'm curious about, first of all, how you came to make that choice, if it was a choice, and what have been some of the trials and tribulations along the way, and what does that look like for you now, having an established career and also being an adult with, I think you have a family, you have kids and different kinds of responsibilities. So I'm curious of how that journey to being an artist full time kind of evolved through your life and some steps along the way, if you could talk about that.
Yeah, man, I think it was something that just kind of organically happened, and I don't think I don't think I ever really had a big plan of what I wanted to do with the guitar. I think ever since I was a kid, or since I found it when I was about 12, it was a sanctuary. I could just kind of sit down and do this, and and like on retrospect, like now that I've gotten older, but like even stuff I was handling in my teenage years, it's like this was how I would process everything. It was just, you could sit down there and it's like, oh, okay. And at the time it was as simple as like, well, okay, I do that and I tend to feel better, or that's something that I like to focus on, or I'm excited about it, or I feel like I'm good at it. So you got a reward from it, sure. I guess so, yeah. But it was a conduit, or it was just a place to, it was a good processor. Yeah. And and I think as I just kind of was just on my path to develop in it, I've just met so many cool people, and I've just had so many great experiences, and it's all like, I think the big motivator for me though still is just I'm out to learn more and try and understand the nature of music as on any level, really. It's not so much about like being super well known or having like, there's never been a huge goal. It's just been like I respect this process. I've gained a lot of peace and a lot of wisdom from this process, and I've learned a lot about myself with it. And so I'm gonna I enjoy spending as much time as I possibly can doing that, or sharing with others ways that it's become easier for me, or ways that I can help other folks do the same thing. But as certain aspects in life changes, I mean, your relationship with it changes. In some cases, you don't have, the time that you did. And I know when I had kids, that's something that definitely changed. I just didn't have the same kind of time that I did before. And I think I took a lesson with one of my favorite players, and he was, he had a daughter, and I was like, hey, like what changes when you have a kid? And he was like, you'll have about a quarter of the time that you did. but he just said it outright, and I was just like, wow. And it got me to think about that. But because of that, I found creative ways to practice away from my instrument. I found, this is part of the things that taught me things. So sometimes when, a situation feels limiting, you just you find kind of new ways to navigate things, and you wind up having new approaches, which can, I don't know, it's part of what makes life interesting, I guess. But I don't know, I still love it, and I'm still learning. And most days it's not perfect. Some days are like, sometimes it's super stressful when there's not a lot of work, or like, the consistency can kind of ebb and flow, and that stuff can be scary. And I think everybody deals with that. But but I mean, man, when it's good, it's the best. It really is. It's like, but I feel extremely grateful and fortunate to, even have been doing this as long as I have. Right. So it's like, I'm just thinking, I'm like, man, I've really got to just explore the depths of this instrument and myself, really, ever since I was 12 years old. Yeah. And it's like, and I'm 40. And just to sit here and just be like, wow, okay, like you've really got to, do your passion for a really long time, which is great. So, that's awesome. But it's it definitely has insane moments, and, you learn how to navigate those as best you can. And it's a weird ride. Nice. What's the Buddhist quote? It's and not that guitar is a lonely. I mean, I guess guitar is kind of lonely. Like being good at music, I think requires a lot of time and space by yourself. Solitude, and the sacrifice time-wise that way. But the quote I heard that I think about often is, it's a lonely road, but a friendly one. And it's kind of like that. You're just like, oh, okay, well, like, yes, it is. It does feel like it's a very personal thing for a lot of people. And like, and a lot of artists can be sensitive, and it can, like that's, it's dicey to put yourself with vulnerability out there. But like this stuff and it is kind of lonely, but the stuff that's cool and the people and some of the opportunities, you're just like, oh wow, like that's really nice, and people are friendly, and the experiences are pretty unique. So, but I've learned a lot about other cultures through it. I've seen like universal elements that are like it's a great communicator for different cultures, and I've met. I guess living in the UK now, I've met a lot of Italians that I never would have met. There's a bunch of great musicians from Italy, and it's funny when you play the same stuff, or when you two thieves know each other on the road kind of thing. You're just like, oh man, okay, like there's instant brotherhood that can kind of happen from that, and it's I don't know. It's taken me some pretty cool places. So I'm grateful for it.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
I know that community is one thing that's offered by school. You know, because a lot of people are like, should I go to school for music? Because I could just learn from a teacher, it's cheaper, I could just go on the bandstand.
Yeah.
But I read in your bio how, you know, from the time you were in high school or whatever, you went to, was it in Atlanta? You went to a Berklee program, or maybe that was before Atlanta, but then you went to UT for jazz. So do you feel like the community was something that really spurred you on because you had these like-minded people?
Big time. Yeah. I think my decision to really pursue music seriously, I think I was 15 and I went to the Berklee summer guitar sessions, which was, you know, this was like 96, I think. And I had applied for a scholarship and I got it. So I thought I was hot shit. And, you know, like they gave out like 25 of them, and I was just like, wow, this kid from
Wait till they see me.
I know, yeah, it'd be great.
I've been checking out Greg Howe.
I know, and man, then I got up there, and it was just, you know, you were with 150 other guitarists in a dorm room in Boston, or you know, a building, a residential building in Boston, and I was just like, man, I was home. I was just seeing all these people, and I was just like, man, these guys are as obsessed about this as I am.
Right.
This is awesome. This rules. And I was up for almost the whole week. Like, I barely slept. I learned so much from being around all these other guys, and just like, it was just like, man, there's a lot of community, and it was cool. And just the feeling of being around a lot of musicians just felt natural. So after that, like, I came back from that, and also I was not like the best cat there at all. Like, all these people were devastating, and I was just like, oh, like, I really didn't deserve this. But maybe I did, but after that, I started, instead of like kind of like, okay, I'll play like a half an hour to an hour a day. I was just like, okay, like, this is what we're doing, and you know, it was like, yeah, that's what I did. I played all day as much as I could, you know, and
you went through that period. The Charlie Parker period.
That period, man. It's like, yeah, you go from playing 30 minutes a day or an hour a day to like, okay, this is what I'm doing for the next 5 hours. And that's like, and before you know it, after a summer, you know, like that 3 months goes by where you're practicing 5 to 8 hours a day.
Yeah.
And then it's just like, oh shit, like, he got really good.
Right.
And then it's just that kind of starts continuing. But yeah, it kind of kicked me into that level of seriousness.
Right.
But a community definitely helped. Like, a community in every place I lived has made a difference. And I think if that stuff isn't any place I've lived and that wasn't there, I feel like that was something that was always off, you know, or that was part of what I was like, okay, I hadn't really found my people here. So like, I got to go to where my people are at. Yeah. And but
you say like who you surround yourself with, that's kind of what you become.
Yeah, you know, man, it's hard to.
You take it as inspirational as opposed to competitive, or they're better than me. Instead, it's like, wow, these people inspire me. That's how it's been.
Yeah, it really is. And in some cases, it was competitive, but it was friendly.
Right? Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I've met too many great people that were just cool. So you're just like, oh, okay, why is there? Yeah. Like, having an ego is silly about this, and you know, and it's one of those things where you meet your heroes, and like, you know, you're like, wow, that guy was an asshole. That sucks. And like, and then now I don't like his music anymore because it's like now there's this weird experience, but. Most of the time, the super important ones, I'm like, that dude's just as cool as I thought he was going to be. Mm-hmm. And it really, you're just like, yeah, great. And having like some of those people that are humble, I guess, and just dedicated to the thing, rather than like, I'm amazing and you should worship me. Right. Like, there's less of that. But community is a big one, man. Community's huge. That's where I feel like the best stuff I've ever learned, I learned from my friends. Mm-hmm. And that's where I worked most of my stuff out musically. It's like us, you know, playing a $20 gig for 2 years at a metal bar that was a jazz jam. It's like, that's what was worth it in college. And I guess the thing I'll say about college is like, man, it all depends on where you go and who you're in school with. Because like, where I ended up at UT was the last school I went to, and I think I bounced around too much, kind of looking for the place that felt right. Mm-hmm. And by the time I got there, I was just like, okay, I just got to go and do it. Mm-hmm. But the class that I was in school with were just some of the most devastating players I'd ever come across. Like everybody was killer. And I knew almost nothing about jazz, but these guys were awesome and they were cool.
Yeah.
And like that combination, it was just like, okay, like great.
Yeah.
And so the classes and stuff, and I mean, my teacher was fantastic that I had, like my private teacher, Mitch Watkins. I learned a ton from him, but I learned just as much, if not more, from just, playing with my friends as much as humanly possible. And that's all we were focused on. We were just trying to get better.
Yeah.
And without that, I think I would have felt disappointed in it. So it's like community made the experience.
That made the experience.
And that made me better.
Right.
That's what made me better.
But you had to be willing to insert yourself in that community, and even you saying I felt like I didn't know anything and they were already killers, but you inserted yourself and you knew that was what you wanted and needed to do, instead of being like, oh, they're so much better, I'm just going to stay in my cocoon.
Yeah. It's just, it's kind of like, oh, what are we doing here? Right. Like if that's the thing, it's like, well, okay, get better. Let's dive in. Yeah. But it can be freaky, but it didn't feel freaky because it had an organic progression to it. And it's, that was really the linchpin. So there's probably a lot of cool stuff in school that I missed out on because I was so focused on that. But I think that's what I needed out of school. And so I wound up having a really good experience. But some of the other places I went, it really didn't have that. And I think that's the thing I was kind of missing. So maybe that's what was important to me. So if someone's considering going, I'd say like, there's a lot of really good aspects to it. But essentially there's quite a lot that you're just going to have to find on your own. Sure. If you're going to school and there's not really a place to play, that was the other thing in Austin. I just needed experience. So going to school here made total sense. Right. It was just like, I want to get out and work as a musician and be busy and, get experience and do all this stuff. So, just don't expect too much, I guess, but like just... anywhere you're looking at, make sure it feels right, and look at the other people that are going there. Look at the town it's in. Does it make sense to be playing music in the middle of Montana? It's like, okay, it might not be, or that might be like, okay, you can learn all this stuff and go get the degree, but you're not going to be able to play anywhere. Or kind of get out and do some of that other stuff. So, like those things are elements that I took for granted. I think when I was just, I was just like, oh, well, like, I just happen to be in Austin. And there's all this stuff. There's all these opportunities and all these kinds of things. And if I had gone somewhere else, it would not have felt like that. So having it be here definitely had its perks as well.
Awesome, man. Yeah. Well, hey, I know you've got to get to teaching. Carter's a big teacher. He's my teacher, even though I haven't taken a lesson in a month. I will re-up my 4-pack soon. Go to his website. Carter will actually send you PDFs with what you worked on, goes above and beyond. Bummer. We ran out of batteries.
That's all right.
That was great, man.
Dude,
thank you. I appreciate it.
My pleasure.
Yeah, I was just about to plug the 4 Shaggies, but I'll mention them in the intro. I'll say you'll see we're both playing these 4 Sagi. Four Sagi guitars, really well made.
Do that and plug his website.
Absolutely.
I bet he'd appreciate that.
Yeah, for sure.
Dude, but that was fun.
Good. Yeah. I'm glad you enjoyed it.
Yeah.
We definitely started with a lot of the talk stuff, but I'm glad then we got into
I think
playing and organic.
We had a totally normal flow.
It went good. Yeah, it was more like good. I didn't feel like a reporter.
That's good.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, my pleasure, man.
All right, everybody. I hope you enjoyed that lesson and interview with Carter Arrington as much as I did. If you want to learn more about him, head over to carterarrington.com. If you want to get the full POW Music learning experience and you like our teaching style with the Fret Live animations, head over to learn.powmusic.co, or you could access any of our courses in the description: Super Strummer, Soloing for Complete Beginners, the Fret Live Fretboard Mastery Program, and you could also join our Patreon community where you get tab, downloads, extended lessons, and all sorts of stuff to go along with what I post on YouTube. But for me, the biggest value is our twice weekly hour-and-a-half live guitar hangouts on Zoom, where we all get together and play and practice twice a week. Links to all of that is in the description. Before I go, I just want to extend a huge thank you to the following POW Music patrons: Jason, Shogun7, Nick P, Billy Paps, Pete Elliott, Sean Westfall, Wes Williams, Eric Pillez, Darren Jones, Dr. Ixlin, Andy, Dennis McNulty, Paul Weatherall, Hal Jones, T. Fletch, Dmitry Unkovsky, Greg, Joe, Wayne Evans, Jeff Lambert, Jorge Vaz, Jack Williams, Joe Prengle, LW, Dave Hubner, Fred Locke, Ruben Garcia, Kay Carter, Steve C., Jens Fischer, Joseph Alpert, Mu Zhang, Darren, Jonas, Jesse Jacobs, David McPherson, Michael L., Brent Owens, Andrew Gunthart, Jay Brilliant, Jake Martin, William Creighton, Donald James Grass, Chris Freeman, Stephen Pisano, Trampus Thompson, Kent Gresham, John Cushman, Baba Shetty, Derek Mickle, Sean Ellis, Jeff Weatherwax, Boomer Dell, and Joe Fleck. Thank you so much, and thank you to all of the POW Music patrons for helping to make it possible to provide all this free content here on YouTube. Thank you so much. Happy playing. I'll see you next time.